Hi, Matt Stait from the Festival of Martial Arts. And today I've got with me Julien Masson. Hi, Julien, how are you?
Hello, Matt. How are you doing? I'm doing well, thank you.
Great, my friend. Thank you ever so much for agreeing to take part in the festival and come along as one of the instructors. So the way that I start these conversations is I ask you to give a brief overview of who you are and what it is that you do for
Yep.
those that may not have heard about you.
Okay, well, my name is Julien Masson. I'm a self-protection and combative instructor. I've been doing that. I mean, I've been growing up with my father, who was in the French Special Forces and who was an instructor as well. So I've been dabbling in this for quite a long time. Did a lot of martial arts. I'm into close protection as well, so I do close protection a little bit here and there. And I am a former instructor under Lee Morrison at Urban Combatives. So that kind of sums it up. My school is called Adrenaline Combatives, which is a big mix of a lot of different approaches, but mainly the realistic stuff. So the stuff that we pressure test and that we see whether or not it works. So that's really my trademark is the pressure test stuff that we do. So kind of staying with just a little bit of things, and we kind of throwing a lot of things out and just staying with just a few things that we can make work under pressure, basically.
Okay, right. Yeah. So that's great. Yeah. Obviously, Lee Morrison is a very well-renowned sort of self-defense combatives
Oh,
guy.
absolutely, yeah.
And so
Amazing
that's,
guy.
yeah, totally. Very, very good at what he does. So with regards to your history then, um, did you learn sort of things from your father? You said he was in the French Foreign Legion. So, was he teaching you that kind of
So
stuff when you
he
were young?
so my father kind of, he didn't stay at the Legion for a long time, but what he did, he actually, after he was like an instructor in the French anti-riot forces in the CRS, the French
Okay.
CRS. And yeah, I mean, I've been starting to train the martial arts from 4 years old, with judo and traditional like Japanese arts. I went on to Filipino and Indonesian arts, Chinese. And then obviously I moved with my father in Eastern Europe, and that was Latvia and Lithuania. And there I was fortunate enough to assist him in providing training for various governmental units. So we provided like tactical and combat training, CQB, to like Lithuanians, so mainly the Second Regiment of Internal Forces of Lithuania, the special intervention unit of the Second Regiment in Lithuania, and the rapid reaction team in the Lukiškės Penitentiary, like a massive central jail in Vilnius. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to assist my father with that sort of training. I went through all the, so I was basically involved with teaching from a young age, assisting my father, and with all the different types of martial arts. And I traveled a lot. I trained under Tommy Carruthers as well in Scotland, which is definitely someone that really impacted the way that I train, the way that I see combat training. And it's like when I arrived and to Tommy, I had a massive toolbox full of techniques and stuff that I gathered from many different arts. And he basically, just to use the analogy of the toolbox, he just took my toolbox and flipped it upside down and just emptied 90% of it, saying to me, you don't need that, you don't need this, that's not simple enough, that's overcomplicated. He just made me stay with 6-7 tools, but we drilled them, and pressure tested them, and with various different types of pressures. And that's what, that's really when I went with the mindset of simplicity, of less is more, do more with less, instead of having an accumulation of techniques to do many things. Just have these 5-6 instruments, tools that you're going to use to do the one thing that really matters. It's end the threat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
That's really the approach.
Yeah, again, the analogy of a toolbox is a good one. Heard it, many times in many guises, and it makes absolute sense. So, have
Yeah.
you, in your travels and journeys, then, because you've mentioned teaching and training in several different countries, do you
Yep.
find that there's differences in the approach to that in the different countries, or is it sort of similar?
Okay, so when you look at martial arts, yes, there is a lot of different approaches when it comes to martial arts, okay? But as soon as you start dabbling into the military combatives and the military, fighting It's not even an art anymore. Now we're finding the same things. We're finding very, very similar things, because the thing is that similar minds come to similar conclusions. And when what you are looking for is realism, then sooner or later you will come to the same conclusions as the rest of the people have. You know, anyone that is serious, that is looking into all that stuff, will come to very similar conclusions. So when you look at what the Russians are doing, for example, it's very, in terms of, I'm talking about the Russian military, the Eastern European, the Lithuanian military, what they will do is very similar. You know, a punch is a punch, a kick is a kick. They think in terms of concept and principles, in terms of strategy and tactics, rather than thinking in terms of technique. Because the traditional martial arts thinks in terms of technique, which means that it doesn't leave a lot of mind on the hard drive, a lot of space on the hard drive, because techniques are too codified. You have one technique for each attack, and there's so many different types of attacks with so many different types of blocks. But when you think in terms of concepts and you think in terms of strategies and tactics, now you realize that every single skill set, every single technique actually reflects a certain principle. And once you understand that, then it doesn't matter what technique you use. What matters is that, are you applying the principle? So, for example, the principle of high to low, principle of environmental damage, using the environment to cause damage, you know, principle of maiming, biting, gouging, of closing the gap, crashing the gap, closing the gap. Oh, these are concepts and principles that there's so many techniques that actually do reflect these concepts and principles. But once you understand the concept and the principle, then you don't think technique anymore. So you actually free a lot of space on the hard drive. And I found that's what the military does. And that's why the military all over the world modified what they do. They don't do traditional, I mean, a lot of them do traditional martial arts on their spare time. But when it comes to what is being taught in the military, it's very often it's adapted to what they're doing. These guys are carrying a lot of kit. It's quite heavy. They got body armor. They got their rifle. They got their bag. They got all their kits to carry. They need to be able to fight a certain way. It's not going to look the same. It's not going to be the same. It's going to be much more gross motor orientated, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And of course, it's only a small part of their arsenal, and there's only a limited amount of training that they can, you know, time they can put into that.
That's true. That's true, and that's why I fell in love with combatives, especially when I've seen. I mean, you know, this combatives now is starting to become a broad term. It's gaining in popularity now. But really, when I think in terms of combatives, the person that really taught me and really structured the way that I think, the way that I teach, and the way that I fight is Lee Morrison, because I think that Lee Morrison is an absolute fighting genius. And there are stuff that he touches that very, very few people touch, you know, like the mindset, the psychology of combat, the actual the criminology aspect, the psychological, the behavioral study aspect, all that stuff. And then there are other people that are really, really good that I like to listen to and learn from. People like Richard Dimitri, and people like Tim Kennedy over the US as well, who's a former UFC guy and a former Green Beret in the US, who's a very knowledgeable guy as well. But there's a lot of people out there, like Craig Douglas as well, from SheWorks. There's a lot of really good people that have made the bridges between the traditional and the actual, you know, realistic form of combat, and make it work under pressure when you're adrenalized and all that. So that's what I find very attractive with combatives, is that it doesn't look pretty at first. When I looked at combatives, because I was a martial artist for a long time, I still am, and I looked at combatives and that looks weird. That doesn't look as clean. That doesn't look very, very clean. But then when I got to know it more and I got to dive into it, I realized, oh right, okay, you know, this is really the closest stuff you'll get to what's happening in real life. So that and certain sports like MMA, Muay Thai, and boxing, I think are amazing, like jiu-jitsu and things like that. Of course, you would have to modify it for the street, but all these arts are great because they deal with resistance straight away from day one. You deal with pressure. You know, in boxing, if you don't keep your hands up, you get punched in the face. So straight away, you learn really quickly. Either you learn whether you got the mindset for it and it's for you and you stick around with it because you know that you're not afraid of getting punched and give it back. Or for some people, it's, you know, just putting kimonos on and just doing katas. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's what I started with, you know. So I think that it's all a progression. I think that every art has got something to offer regarding the terrain, you know, where you are, the type of situation you are in, and your rules of engagement, for example. So if you're a police officer, you're going to use, you got different rules of engagement, like if you are a soldier, for example. So your skill set is going to differ in many, many ways. If you work in security, same thing. Your skill set is going to differ. And if you are a sport fighter, now you're a point scorer. Now you need to win by, you know, by points. That's different because the concepts behind it are completely different. And I think it's very important, if you want to find something realistic, to understand how violence occurs, how violence feels like. I think that is very important, you know, to have a real life experience with violence. Not everybody has, but some people have. Especially, I know you work the doors as well. It's stuff that, you know, you can't work the doors and not have to face violence, and that for a lot of people, it's why we started. I know why I started to do the doors, because I wanted to have real life experience. I wanted to see how I cope under pressure, how I deal with adrenaline, how I deal with violence, and how are my de-escalation skills, my communication skills, my listening skills. All that stuff was things that I wanted to work on. And I think that, you know, if you want to be an instructor that can really bring something to your students, something real, you need to have a real life experience. I think that is primordial, you know.
Lots there that I very much agree with. And as you say, it's a journey, and but what I do find is, and this is something that applies to everybody, I think, as you go through life, your requirements from your training change and they get different. So if you're a fit sort of 20-30-year-old guy working on the doors and that sort of thing, then your training is going to be fast, it's going to be hard paced, it's going to be all about the real and everything else. And then, you know, maybe as you change, maybe as your world changes, then your training is done for different reasons: fitness, community, friendship, all kinds of other good stuff that doesn't necessarily involve real violence in that term. So you know, there's a place for everybody within that, and that, I think, is what's fascinating about it, because I don't train now like I used to 20 odd years ago. And when I was fully immersed in security, bodyguarding, bailiff work, all that kind of thing, my mentality was completely different. You know, I live in a completely different world now, and thank goodness for that, to be honest with you. And so, but I still love what I do. So that takes us then really onto onto the festival itself, and what you're going to be looking to showcase and talk about at the festival.
Right. So the idea, because I got, you know, like Adrenaline Combatives is really encompassing a wide range of things, and there are aspects of attributes development, technical development, and then fight development. So it really depends it's time dependent, depending how much time we got. Generally, we got an hour spot. In an hour, we can really scratch the surface of one little thing. Do you know what I mean? As you know, so I think I've not yet decided completely what we're going to have a look at, but it's in terms of the structure of how it's going to be. There's going to be an attribute development part of it to teach people the actual movement. There's going to be a technical development aspect of it to start seeing how you can apply that movement onto a living person. And then towards the end, there's going to be some sort of fight development, where now we're going to see how we're going to be able to apply that movement onto a person that's resisting and that's applying some sort of pressure. So that's what we're going to do.
Again, that all sounds like great fun as much as anything else.
Oh yeah, of course, man.
Which is one of the things that we sort of want to encourage at the festival. So no, that's fantastic. So in the meantime, then, before the festival itself, if people want to reach out and contact you, how can they find you?
Okay, so I got the YouTube channel called Adrenaline Combatives, where there are hundreds of videos if people want to have a look at what we do. I do have a page as well on Facebook and a group all of it is called Adrenaline Combatives. So if you basically Google Adrenaline Combatives, you will find everything. I got an Instagram page as well that's called Adrenaline Combatives. The website is 95% done. We've been working on it for quite a while now, but it should be out and running in the next month or two. So that's, you know, if people want to find me, it's Adrenaline Combatives, and they'll find everything they need to know on all that.
Oh, fantastic! I'll put the link for your Facebook or YouTube down in the description here, so people can just go through that if they want to. So, Julien, thanks ever so much for taking the time today, and we really look forward to seeing you at the festival.
Well, same here. Thank you for having me, Matt.
Oh, my pleasure.